What if I told you that evil doesn't always wear a villain's face? What if the most dangerous people in history weren't monsters hiding in the shadows, but ordinary people? People who might have looked just like you and me. This is Hannah Arendt's chilling idea, the banality of evil. The unsettling truth that horrors are often committed not by madmen, not by demons, but by clerks, neighbors, teachers, even parents, people simply doing their jobs. And the most terrifying part? It's not just history, it's happening around us today. Let's go back to 1961. Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi official responsible for organizing the transport of millions to their deaths, was captured and brought to trial in Jerusalem. The world expected a monster, someone whose face screamed cruelty, someone whose presence radiated hatred. But Eichmann, he looked ordinary, a bureaucrat in a grey suit, a man who could have been your accountant. He wasn't charismatic, he wasn't brilliant, he didn't even seem particularly hateful. Instead, he repeated the same line over and over. I was just following orders. Hannah Arendt, covering the trial, described him not as mastermind of evil, but as a man who had shockingly stopped thinking. A man who surrendered his conscience to the system around him. And this, she wrote, was the banality of evil. Now here's why this matters. If evil always looked monstrous, we'd know how to fight it. We'd recognize it instantly, call it out, and resist. But when it looks like paperwork, when it hides behind uniforms, when it sounds like just doing your job, it becomes almost invisible. Think about it. Who kept the trains running on time in Nazi Germany? Ordinary workers. Who signed the paperwork for deportations? Clerks. Who looked away when neighbors disappeared? Friends and co-workers. They weren't cartoon villains. They were ordinary people. And that's what makes Arendt's insight so radical. Evil doesn't always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from something far more ordinary. Thoughtlessness. Let that word echo. Thoughtlessness. Arendt wasn't alone in seeing this. Around the same time, psychologists began testing just how far ordinary people would go under authority. In 1961, Stanley Milgram at Yale University ran his famous obedience experiments. Volunteers were told to give electric shocks to a stranger in another room every time he got an answer wrong. The shocks weren't real, but the volunteers didn't know that. They heard screams, pleas to stop, even silence suggesting the man had passed out. And yet, 65% of participants continued. They delivered what they believed were potentially lethal shocks, simply because the experimenter in a lab coat told them to. Think about that. Nearly 2 out of 3 people were willing to kill, just because someone in authority told them to. These weren't sadists. They weren't monsters. They were teachers. They were salesmen. They were everyday people. When authority spoke, they obeyed, even against their conscience. The same dynamic Arendt saw in Eichmann played out in Milgram's lab. And it didn't stop there. The Stanford prison experiment in 1971 confirmed it further. Students were randomly assigned roles, guards or prisoners. Within days, the guards, normal college kids, began humiliating, abusing, and psychologically breaking the prisoners. No one told them to be cruel. No one ordered them to abuse. But in the role of authority, they became cruel anyway. What does this show us? It shows us that evil doesn't require monsters. It doesn't require hatred. It only requires ordinary people in systems that reward obedience, conformity, and silence. Solomon Asch's experiments in the 1950s revealed another disturbing truth. Most of us will go along with the crowd, even when we know they're wrong. In his study, participants were asked to match line lengths. The answer was obvious. But when everyone else in the room gave the wrong answer, 75% of people conformed at least once. Think about that. People doubted their own eyes, just to avoid standing out. Now combine this with Arendt's insight. A system doesn't need everyone to be cruel. It just needs enough people to stay silent, obey orders, and follow the crowd. And this isn't just history. Look around today. On social media, ordinary people join digital mobs, canceling, shaming, destroying reputations. Not because they're evil, but because everyone else is doing it. In corporations, employees stay silent when they see wrongdoing, because speaking up means risking their job. In politics, voters support harmful policies, not because they want to hurt people, but because it feels safer to go along with their group. The banality of evil is alive and well. It thrives in systems where questioning authority feels dangerous and conformity feels safe. Here's why Arendt's idea was so groundbreaking. For centuries, philosophers tried to define evil. Augustine saw it as sin. Kant saw it as choosing to act against moral law. Nietzsche saw it as an expression of power. But Arendt said, no. Evil doesn't require demons or villains. It requires thoughtlessness. The refusal to stop, reflect, and ask, is this right? That shift is why her theory remains one of the most unsettling in philosophy. So, if this is true, what can we do? Arendt believed the answer was simple, but difficult. Thinking. Not in the shallow sense of having thoughts, but in the deeper sense of refusing to hand over your conscience to authority. It means questioning orders instead of blindly obeying. It means refusing to follow the crowd when you know it's wrong. It means taking responsibility for your choices, even when the system makes it easy to hide. So let me ask you, have you ever gone along with something you knew was wrong, just because it was easier than speaking up? Have you ever silenced yourself to avoid standing out? Have you ever thought, it's not my responsibility, when you knew deep down it was? These moments might seem small, but history shows us they're exactly how ordinary people become part of extraordinary horrors. Hannah Arendt's warning is clear. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like us, when we stop thinking for ourselves. The real question is this: when the pressure comes, when it's easier to obey than to resist, will you stand fast? If this video made you pause for even a moment, that's already a start. Because every act of critical thinking, no matter how small, is an act of resistance. Here's my challenge. This week, take one belief, one rule you follow, and question it. Ask yourself, if I stripped away the authority, the crowd, the convenience, would I still believe this? If the answer is yes, you'll hold it more firmly. If the answer is no, you've just taken one step closer to intellectual freedom. Tell me in the comments, what's one rule or belief you're willing to question this week? Because in a world that rewards obedience, the simple act of thinking may be the most radical thing you can do.